Today, as we embark on this journey of productivity and success, let us draw inspiration from those who have left an indelible mark on the pages of history. As the great Mahatma Gandhi once said, "The future depends on what you do today." These words remind us that our actions in the present shape the landscape of our future. Every productive step we take today is a building block for the tomorrow we envision. Consider the words of Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, who said, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work." Embracing productivity means recognizing opportunities in the midst of effort, understanding that success often wears the attire of hard work. In the words of Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. Productivity becomes fulfilling when it aligns with our passion and purpose, driving us to do work that we find truly meaningful. As we stand at the crossroads of opportunity and effort, let these words resonate in our hearts. Let us channel the spirit of these visionaries as we commit ourselves to a life of productivity and purpose. Or, don't. How self-help gurus manipulate us through quotes. Hi, my name is Eric, and before we get into today's Let's Talk, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button down below if you enjoyed my little intro, as well as want to be seeing more content in the future. I will be uploading a video once every week. I haven't quite figured out on a specific day, just whenever I have the chance to record something and to get some work on it. But anyway, with all of that said, let's talk about quotes. Quotes are something that we're all very familiar with, and they're mentioned so often. They're great popcorn content for on social media, and for me, it was a good introduction to self-help. Back in 2015, I was part of a network marketing company, and I was awaiting my graduation ceremony for my accounting degree. So between all of that, I had a lot of people from my network marketing company tell me, "Hey, you need to be investing in yourself and your future and all of that fun stuff." And that kind of led me down this particular path where I met an individual by the name of Ty Lopez. I know he still is making courses to this day, but at the time, I wasn't very familiar with his work or the various memes surrounding him, specifically the one about him in his garage. But what stuck out to me was when I attended that webinar one afternoon, I noticed that he had a tendency of mentioning a lot of quotes. Not specifically quotes of himself, but quotes of other people. Oftentimes he started sentences with "to quote," or similar to what I had in my opening speech, where they kind of just led right into a famous person saying something. But this technique isn't just something that Lopez does, though. There's a lot of other people that do this, and it's frankly a staple in the entire self-help industry. There are plenty of articles online where they talk about various quotes from a specific individual or just on a general theme like boosting your happiness and getting motivated for something or whatever. There are so many of these types of articles that are just in here, in the self-help industry. But despite all of the positive aspects of quotes, there's also a sort of a darker side to quotes to some extent. And this is the part where I'm going to start to get very conspiratorial. For one, I think that quotes, in a sense, are very manipulative in certain contexts and used in certain ways, similar to the fact that Ty Lopez uses so many quotes in his webinars leading up to the pitch. Keep in mind that quotes in general are not very deceptive in nature, but they are certainly a tool that can help in kind of gluing everything together into grifts that self-help gurus use.
It's all connected.
They are essentially the hooks that result in us trusting these individuals, reinforcing a particular way of thinking, convincing ourselves these people are very smart, and it ultimately leads to us buying whatever they're selling because of those things. I really want to be taking some time to be talking a little bit about quotes, even though there are definitely some much bigger aspects and tactics that are being used. But hey, I just wanted to focus on some baby steps. How do quotes build trust? So, one of the first rules of making a sale to someone is that you need to be building trust with them immediately. This results in a wide variety of tactics that a sales rep will use. So, things like a warm approach, being friendly, smiling, being energizing, and just being a great conversationalist is a pretty good start. And in the sales world, where people know immediately that you're there to sell them something, these sort of tactics are a given. But the methods and tactics that are used to sell something in the self-help world are more nuanced than that. In the self-help world, it's pretty rare for us to open up immediately with a sales pitch to someone.
Shut up and take my money!
You don't really have those kind of aggressive tactics until later on, once people have already been warmed up to you and you already have a bit of an impression of what they actually need. And that sort of tactic is the same thing that's used in network marketing companies. I don't know about you, but if you've ever gone to some network marketing pitches, they don't immediately open up with joining our network marketing company until pretty much until the very end. Building trust is a slow process, but gurus have a lot of tools at their disposal. There are obviously the sales tactics, but they can also focus on some other tactics that can match their intentions. For example, webinars are a great tool for that sort of reason, as well as just giving away some more information through content, consultations. One of the other things that they could use is they can use quotes within all of these things. And quotes build trust primarily because they are very relatable on multiple layers. For a lot of us, we are very familiar with a lot of brilliant-minded people. Some of the people that I mentioned in my intro, I'm sure that people know exactly who these people are. But then there's also just the message itself, which is very relatable. Even if the person is unknown or you've never heard of this person before, then the overall message can be something that you can still resonate with.
I understood that reference.
They are quick bursts of information, give people the impression that they're well read. It's ultimately a very sneaky way to building trust because all a guru has to do is encourage you to feel a particular emotion and then validate that emotion that they created with a quote from a famous person. So how do quotes promote narrow-minded thinking? At diving more into the conspiratorial rabbit hole that I have created in this video, in order for quotes to be a trust-building tactic, the easiest way of building trust is to use them to validate certain emotions or instill certain positive emotions that we're experiencing. They're not outright manipulative, but in the right kind of context, they can be. One of the first ways we can glimpse into their manipulative nature is how they wedge people into a particular way of thinking. Like with so many other self-help gurus, Tai Lopez isn't that big of a fan of secondary education. There are plenty of reasons to go against it with how expensive it is to get a degree, and even getting one doesn't guarantee a decent paying job. These sorts of sentiments can be validated by quotes that encourage people to learn through their own means rather than the obvious path of a university or college. But even before the overall message is delivered, quotes by nature instill that sort of narrow thinking when we consider the fact a great deal of context is missing from those quotes in the first place. Not to mention the overall history of the famous person who said that quote. For example, you might be finding some inspiration from particular quotes like this. In order to succeed, your desire for success should be greater than your fear of failure. Decide that you want it more than you are afraid of it. People can be more forgiving than you can imagine, but you have to forgive yourself. Let go of what's bitter and move on. They sound really great, don't they? Inspiring, uplifting, even, right? Well, for some of us, we might feel differently when we learn that these quotes are specifically from Bill Cosby. Quotes from a man that had plenty of women suing him for sexual assault, with another case emerging from women who worked at the Cosby Show very recently. The point is that while quotes are great, they can change the meaning and the implication from the person who said it. And when you lack history, which a lot of self help gurus fail to provide, by the way, it leads to specific ways of thinking about the person and the people who use those quotes on a regular basis. I used a quote in my opening intro for Steve Jobs, and from that quote alone, we think of him as this very brilliant visionary. But a lot of coworkers say Steve Jobs is not really that great of a person. In fact, he's a bit of an asshole. And in some cases, he also has some very weird quirks, such as refusing to bathe. And in certain cases, when he does want to go for a wash or to de-stress, he puts his feet into a toilet bowl. There's also his unusual eating habits, with one point in time where he was eating nothing but carrots, to the point where his skin was actually starting to turn a little orange. And this doesn't just apply to Steve Jobs. There are plenty of other people who have their own kind of weird histories, or in some cases have lied to the public about who they really are.
What did you say?
Of course, in many of those cases, people didn't really know about these kinds of things. Usually, when it comes to quotes, we don't tend to think about the actual person all that much, and we kind of just blurt out whatever quote that they have, and if we find it very meaningful. But it's a much bigger deal when it comes to someone who's in the self-help industry, where quotes are a more significant role, and spending some more time researching and putting together like a really good product that can actually help people, and realize like quotes from a dubious person is not the greatest look to have. And of course, mistakes are to be expected here. But when we learn about these things about people, we make some changes to how we acknowledge those people. And to encourage those words without addressing that context means being okay with misleading people about ourselves and of whom we are quoting in the first place. How quotes make us think all self-help gurus are smart. When social media entered into our lives, we developed a lot of things. As plenty of studies remind us, a lot of it is pretty bad. But some of it are particular skills that we didn't have. One particular skill I want to be highlighting is the fact that we're really good at filtering our lives through social media. Between filter features on apps and being able to edit videos, we've created a craft where we can present ourselves in a very specific way than what we're actually like. Some good examples in the self-help industry are shorts, with people like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate. You can look at these individuals through these clips, and you can piece together a pretty positive image of these people. For Jordan Peterson, you can take him as this highly intellectual individual who also experiences things on a profound level that brings him to tears. If you take him into the full context and you understand who Jordan Peterson actually is, you can see him more as a grifter and not quite this visionary or intellectual individual that a lot of people praise him for. The same case is for Andrew Tate as well. Some people think that he's this great individual when he's really not, because right now he's in jail for abducting women and holding them against their will. But the thing with quotes is it can serve as the same sort of filter at the same time. It can be used to direct people into a particular direction. In the sense with Steve Jobs, we can think these great visionaries are these very wealthy individuals. And when you have a lot of wealth, well, a lot of people think that they are very profound. And it kind of leads to the same sort of billionaire or millionaire worship that we are experiencing today. But then quotes are also working double duty in the sense that the person who is even quoting them in the first place is also a very smart individual, because they wouldn't be quoting this person if they thought that they were not that great of a person or they had some kind of dubious past. Such was the case with me with Tai Lopez, because I thought he was a very inspiring individual and very intellectual, because he was quoting so many books and other famous people along the way. But it's these kinds of inferences that make us think that self-help gurus who are using quotes in the first place, or in general, are people that we can trust, and that we know that they know what they're talking about. However, this sort of expectation creates these falsehoods which self-help gurus can take advantage of and ultimately misdirect us into buying whatever it is that they're trying to sell, or keep us locked into a very specific mindset, such as billionaire worshiping. How quotes make us buy into whatever self-help gurus are selling. And of course, one of those misdirections is, as I've just said, all about buying whatever it is that they're selling.
Shut up and take my money!
Because they're using quotes and a variety of other tactics, it makes us think that these individuals are very smart and very knowledgeable, and that the solutions that they are providing for us are the best way out of solving our problems, and they're well worth whatever price they're charging in the first place. But as I mentioned, a lot of the goals of self-help gurus are for you to consume their content. They're there for the sales. They want to be making the money, and that's all they really care about. Quotes kind of make a natural transition through sales because they instill and validate our emotions in the first place, and then they give us that very narrow view of what a person is like and of the direction that they want us to go into. Ultimately, it's a very subtle way of thinking, and it's combined with a variety of other tactics that, again, we just buy whatever it is that they're selling. And we also feel excited about whatever it is that we're buying, and just the overall feeling of taking a leap in solving our problems.
Congratulations! Congratulations! Congratulations!
However, the chances of us using the product and finding that it's actually helpful is slim. There's always a possibility that we don't end up using what we bought in the first place. Some prime examples are self-help books. There are plenty of people who only buy the book and they feel accomplished from just buying the book and never opening it. For others, they might just read like the first chapter, and there's only a very small percentage of people who actually read the entirety of the book in the first place. And this is even before we even get to applying that information in the first place. But beyond that behavior, we also have quotes that give us the impression of overhyping a product and then underselling the product itself. Our expectations are incredibly high because of the quotes, us thinking that they're very smart and knowledgeable people, and just a variety of other tactics that self-help gurus use to hype up their products. And from that, we create this internal contract in our minds that whatever it is that they're selling is something that we desperately need and that will solve all of our problems. When in reality, it's just not exactly what we bought and what we expected in the first place. All of this reinforces a feedback loop that isn't at all helpful, and is something that I will be covering in a future video. But ultimately, this feedback loop can be best summarized as us thinking that a self-help guru is very smart and can't be wrong about certain things, and it nudges the onus on ourselves to fix ourselves in the first place. And if we struggle with the steps that we have been so graciously provided by the self-help guru, it makes us feel like we're in the wrong about who they are and what they are and what we're doing in the first place. We stay in that feedback loop through several reminders, like we haven't manifested hard enough, or we've doubted our own abilities, or we're too much of a negative thinker and we have to purge all the negativity from our system, or we haven't hustled enough, or some other reason. There are plenty out there, and our brains have a way of just finding some excuses, as well as self help gurus planting these kinds of doubts or these sorts of things where they're not the problem, we are the problem, even though they are the ones that gave us the information to help us out in the first place. And we were the ones that have sought them out because we thought, hey, these people might help us. How can we make this stop? Quotes are but a small facet of a self help guru's arsenal, and there are plenty of ways to pull us into that feedback loop without using quotes at all. But I really wanted to be focusing on quotes for this particular video because they're the easiest to overcome in my mind. Simply because they are very relatable, they are generally everywhere, and there's so many of them, and in general, they're pretty harmless. But ultimately, the biggest way for us to stop quotes having such a big impression on us is to find new motivational sources for ourselves, to loosen the grip that quotes are motivational for us. If we see quotes as nothing more than just a jumble of words and maybe sometimes a few life lessons here and there without us thinking too much into it, then it's a lot easier for us to not be influenced by them. And if someone is using a lot of quotes all the time to try and get us to buy something, we kind of look at that as more of a bizarre quirk of them.
You're weird, buddy. You're weird.
So how we can start getting to that point where we start thinking it's really weird that someone is using a lot of quotes really comes down to us being able to look at motivational sources a little bit differently and to notice the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Quotes are a lot of extrinsic motivation, which is just this really highly emotional burst of motivation. They're very inspiring immediately. But the thing with extrinsic motivation is that it's very short-lived. It's kind of like a firework, as it were, where it's just this massive burst of energy, but then it just fizzles out not that long after. They are incredibly addictive because, well, who doesn't like fireworks? And having a lot of fireworks just explode all at once, that it feels really great. It feels really good. And it can be very addictive. And that's kind of the thing that quotes kind of do, where it can lead you down this particular path where you don't really think a whole lot and you just find them very inspiring and motivational, and you don't consider much of the implications. You're not trying to really use your own internal sources for motivation, which is where intrinsic motivation comes in, where it's all very internal, it's all very personal motivation. And leaning more into that sort of motivation can reduce the power of quotes being a motivational source and being manipulated by them in the first place. Because you have your own internal sources of motivation, you're more likely to think of things in a more practical way because you don't really need to feel certain emotions. You're more concerned about asking yourself very specific questions about products that the self-help guru is selling. You're more likely to be asking about the practicality of something and whether this is actually something that's very appropriate for you and is actually going to be very helpful for you. And it's this behavior that ultimately leads us to better growth. And that is all I wanted to be talking about for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the entirety of the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to go and leave a like, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already for more videos like this in the future.